Oh, I see. Tax insurance and accessories is here, so I can at least begin to speak now. Um, I was going to call it the censorship information service because I've just realised the level of censorship now operating on YouTube, as well as perhaps on. I had great difficulty getting on a space earlier, but never mind about that. Scott is here.
Good morning.
Hello, Scott. Good to
Thanks for the
see you.
invite.
Yes, um, can you hear me okay? It sounds a bit.
Yeah, there's like a graininess to it every time you speak. Yeah, I
I'm
don't think I'm
beginning to
hearing.
suspect
There you
that
go.
you're not hearing me.
I am
Maybe
now.
I should close a
I've let.
few windows or something. Which maybe sometimes it needs a time to settle. I guess I'll close a few windows and hope it settles down in a bit after I've shared this link. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um,
How you doing
okay.
this
Oh,
morning?
good. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I guess I'm
Or actually, it's evening
in a
for
way
me.
raring
So
to go because I wanted to say a few things on Chris's stream, and he, as usual, yeah, he had to go to work. So but I did notice as I was catching up listening on double speed, triple speed, quadruple speed that that PVK's sermon yesterday was being mentioned. Did you watch it by any chance, Scott?
I did not. No, I did not watch yesterday's. I watched the one from. It would be now like 8 days ago. So last
Uh huh.
week's. It was about
Right.
all her talking and does it do anything? And he
Okay,
made
that
what
was a
I
bit.
felt was a good argument that it does produce something. Um, that the talking leads to some of us taking action. The talking leads to other people joining in the conversation. Um, yeah, yeah, and I found it helpful. Yeah, the last couple of years, I've noticed around this time, everybody starts talking about what are we doing, and so I think that was to
Yeah, I
address
don't know
that.
what's wrong with your audio. It's kind of very, it's not very steady.
It's
It
probably because
seems
my headset. I'll try to stay
I
with my
I really can't
headphones
hear you
right
very well.
now. Okay.
Um, I guess it's not a good day for me on um, social media today. Um, can it be adjusted? He's gone and come back again. PVK's sermon I thought was interesting yesterday because he was talking about water turning into wine, and he talked about Christianity as a an ongoing process. Something began to happen; it's still happening, and I thought that was profound. But maybe other people had a different interpretation of it. On Hello, Scott.
Hey, is that any better?
Oh, yes, much better. Oh,
Morning.
that's a great relief. You changed rooms. I see. You're in a different room now, aren't you?
No, I just switched to my laptop from my phone.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. It's much better. So that's great.
So
And
water to wine with PBK.
yeah. So he was hinting that it was a beginning of a process that is now that is even now continuing, and yeah, I thought that was pretty profound. But maybe somebody will have an entirely different interpretation of what he was saying. Quite often people don't but maybe that's not the thing to talk about since you haven't even seen it. um, but on Chris's channel he was talking about some ICE pastor being intimidated by the locals in Minnesota, wasn't he? And then Kent State was
But
mentioned.
yeah, they interrupted church services. I guess he got doxxed, and they started protesting, trying to shut down the church because he's a part of the church. That was at least my sense of it. I didn't know anything about the story until Chris said something.
Yeah, it does mean that depending on which side. Well, I guess Renee Good is a kind of the the opposite of Charlie Kirk, right? Because when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, there were a lot of people said he deserved it, and and now that the boot is on the other foot, a lot of people are saying she deserved it, and I'm glad I won't be on that jury, because I'm sure there will be a lot of witness intimidation.
Maybe.
I think there was a lot of witness
I think the
intimidation in the George Fentanyl. What's his name? I can't even remember now.
George Floyd.
Yes, the George Floyd, George Fentanyl, silly me, case. Yes, and yeah, and the church is really kind of helpless. I mean, because it was from Mark Parker that I heard him say, blue church, red church. It's like, since when was the church meant to be divided into colours? I mean, it was bad enough, in the Reformation. Is it Catholic? Is it Protestant? Is it Orthodox? Is it, Mormon? And even now, yeah, I remember I was getting into a fight with Yoav because he said Mormonism is an Abrahamic religion, and I said, of course it isn't. It's not, because the Mormon God is not the Abrahamic God. So how can you call it, an Abrahamic religion? It might be a category of Christianity, but it can't be Abrahamic, surely.
So I'm not super familiar with what I'm familiar with Mormonism. I believe the guy's name is John Smith. He felt
Joseph
he
Smith.
got another revelation from God. So I think it's just another offshoot. And instead of being directly from Abraham, it's kind of offshoot of Christianity. It's the way. I actually knew a Mormon girl when I was young. I had a crush on her, actually. She said she was the first girl that told me she felt like I was a brother to her.
Friend zone. Friend zone. Well.
But they have another book based on the revelations of, I believe his name's John Smith. They call it the Book of Mormon.
Yeah,
So
I think it's Joseph Smith. I watched a movie. No, sorry, not a movie. It was a drama series called American Primeval, based on a true story about the Meadow something massacres. Really quite well. I mean, it was compelling anyway. I found it compelling, but maybe not the most what's the word, promoting of religion, of the Mormon religion, because the Mormons were objecting to it. but yes,
Well,
I
they,
okay.
they've always experienced a lot of heat, I would say. That's one reason why they're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, Utah.
Yeah, the Mountain Meadows massacre. That was what I was trying to remember. And yes, my experience of Mormons is that they're very, very well educated. I was talking to a Mormon and I just assumed he must be in the 70s because he had perfect grammar. And then he told me he was only 19. so he had this, just anyway.
Very family
But I mean,
oriented.
yeah. Well, but
Yeah,
because
they're
they
very
used to be
family oriented, and
polygamous,
they
right?
believe I'm sorry.
Because they used to be polygamous until they were, threatened with the Mormon extermination order, and then they had to give it up because basically they were threatened with extermination unless they gave up their polygamy.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, I thought they still had practices. I believe there's, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought there was like a show on TLC or something, oddly enough, um, where they talk about where they follow people, kind of like a reality TV show.
Oh yes, yes. Yes, I know a friend who said, it's kind of the Jack Mormon, doing things that Mormons weren't supposed to do, but prospering and, and having, being um, doing a drama documentary and getting publicity for Mormons, but it's not proper Mormonism kind of thing. But
Same
but
arguments for all the faiths. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well,
We
yeah,
agree.
because
You're not
they
doing it.
fundamentally. Well, I suppose they do come to America and lose their identity because it's like on the one hand the First Amendment is a great thing, but then it means anybody can come and start a cult of their own and make up a
You do it for
religion.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's fundamental ickiness of democracy is that eventually mob rules, and yeah, it's one reason why we actually don't have a democracy. We got a republic, so it's to
Well,
try
you
to
can
help
be
mitigate.
both.
Hmm?
I mean, it's not mutually exclusive. You can be a republic and not be a democracy, and you can be a republic and be a democracy. It's not, mutually exclusive. But
I think at
I
the
think
level too is important.
the what?
At the level,
What
so
does that mean? Sorry.
so higher up with the ideals, like say at the federal level, democracy is much more difficult because you can't know everything that needs to be known. Not everybody can know everything that needs to be known on a particular issue, right? But the more local you are, right, the more you've developed and cultivated relations with the people around you. You can all have a much more common understanding of the problem, which gives you insight into being able to make a proper decision on which way to move. So the further down
Yeah.
the stack, I think democracy has a bigger role as opposed to being at the federal level. That's one reason why
Well,
it's set up the way it is.
well, Washington actually said don't have political parties. I mentioned it to Chris, and he can't accept that it literally means no political parties. But when you think of how the different parties behave, what is the point of saying the Republicans are saints or the Democrats are saints, and just by the Democrats once being the party of the KKK and now being the party of the BLM just shows how unprincipled they are. And these political divisions are in fact unnecessary and confusing to the American people. And but it doesn't mean that just because you don't have elections means you're not consulted. I mean, you can be consulted and not have elections. but of course it has to be genuine consultation and not, the fake consultation that we have under the current system.
Well, I think you touched on the same point I was making, is like, how do you consult 325 million people about any given issue that's going to be before Congress that day?
Well, you don't
You just
consult
can't.
them. Yeah, but you don't have to do it, in every 4 years or anything like that. What you could do is, you only have one party and you send a number of candidates and they go and schmooze the people. But it's, that they would have the principle of governing in the national interest, and, anything that is, any policy would be, approved or rejected, supported or rejected, on arguments of whether it's in the national interest to do, whatever. I mean, isn't that so much more sensible? And I was thinking you could have groups representing, agriculture, industry, transport, all these, commerce, all these different sectors of the economy, as well as, representing married parents, bachelors and spinsters, that kind of thing. You could do that.
I think you're describing what was originally tried to be set up. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, because once upon a time,
they tried to set up. I just don't think, and I think you would agree, that we're just not there anymore.
well, we could talk about going back there, and because, there's obviously a lot of complaints and disorder and, people not being happy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's the arguments that are going on right now. Is you have a group of individuals that, maybe for nostalgic reasons, maybe for, a myriad of reasons, feel like we need to go back. But there's also a cohort of people that even the idea of going back is repulsive, because of some of the things that it puts on the table if you're going backwards. And I think that's the discussion that's taking place,
Such as,
in the West. Well, look, I mean, if you're going backwards, I mean, I think the first thing that would scare people about moving backwards is, the reproductive rights and gay rights. And then the next thing on the list would be, I mean, just kind of walk yourself backwards in time from
okay,
the
wait.
movements.
Oh,
And I think that scares people. And look, I don't think that they're wrong to be scared if the talk is about moving backwards.
well, we can't move backwards because we haven't got a time machine, right? We can't, you know, we can't do that even if we wanted to. I mean, all we can do is kind of make things fairer, and yeah, I guess I'm just this person with this idea that nobody will even, even look at, right? And I'm not saying, I know people think, oh, she just wants to behead us if we're not Christian and throw gays off, tall buildings. And of course, it's not like that at all. And I say, well, you could read the book, but they're too busy or hate-filled to even consider doing it. Maybe they're scared of being seen to be reading it. I know people who said, I can't be ordering your book on Amazon because somebody might trace it to me and I'll be caught, be one of those people who've, ordered this book online. And, so there is a lot of fear of even being seen to be entertaining certain ideas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm basically saying I'm not proposing anything scary that I won't myself be prepared to live under. And
Yeah, I just don't know if that comports with a lot of people.
I know, but most people are not capable of rational discourse. They just won't be seen to be talking to, about certain things. And yeah, I guess I continue to look for somebody, prepared to discuss the ideas on its own merits. Um, you know, what I propose actually uncompromisingly supports the First Amendment, because that, there is a verse in the Quran that says there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error. You would know this from the way Muslims behave, but then, most Muslims are ignorant, frightened, and not prepared to discuss ideas that they don't normally discuss. But they can't deny the existence of the verse, or that Thomas Jefferson possessed a copy of the Quran, which is now the White House Quran, and he did read it before he negotiated with the Barbary pirates.
Know thy enemy, love thy enemy.
Exactly. So it can't be, oh yeah, he was a guy who had a massive library, but we all have books that we buy that we never read, don't we? It's on record in American history that he did read it before negotiating with the Barbary pirates. And there is a verse that says there is no compulsion in belief. And even in theological discourse, there is talk about free will, unless
Well,
you're a
that's a debated
Calvinist.
topic, right? Free will's even a debated topic.
Well, it's allowed by Allah. It's the thing in the Quran. I mean, it's also I guess part of the narrative of the Book of Job, isn't it? That Job was at liberty to curse God and die, but he chose not to.
Mm-hmm. No, I tend to be a believer in free will. Yeah, but I'm just saying that the notion of free will is something that's debated, that people don't agree on. And I think on every issue, you're going to have individuals sitting on one side of the fence and others sitting on the fence for a myriad of reasons. I don't think it's, I think everything. I mean, even the way a marriage works, and, you know,
Well,
I have the ability to not pay my mortgage, but, so it's you,
that will happen if you don't pay it. I
right,
understand,
right.
but I mean, surely you accept that arguments can be won.
Well, I mean, so even the idea of winning an argument,
Oh,
in my,
nobody cares about the arguments. That's what you're saying. Nobody gives a damn about the arguments. They just look around them and say, "Oh, my group is more than your group, so we're going to win because we're just bigger. There's more of us." And people say, "Oh yeah, okay, I guess I'll shut up then."
I don't. What came to my mind just now was democracy. I mean, you essentially described democracy. People
Well,
getting into arguments, trying
okay,
to
you're talking to
argument.
somebody who rejects it. I reject representative democracy. And I'm saying it's a Washingtonian idea. Washington said no political parties.
Well, that's what he wanted. Yeah, I've, I've. That was one of his kind of disappointments. But if you think about it, it was kind of inevitable because there was going to have to be a decision made once he decided to step down. And once he
Well,
decided to step down, there was difference in who they thought should be the next person, which is essentially where the political party divide came from.
I think it was
And
a 7 years war, wasn't it?
it was a what?
It was a 7 years war. It was a Napoleonic war, and Americans couldn't decide which side to take because
Well, no, it was right off the rip on who they were going to elect to replace Washington that the divide came from. And it was because of my understanding of it was this is why Trump put Andrew Jackson and a picture of Andrew Jackson, because a big part of it was that doesn't get talked about a lot was the idea that they didn't want to have a national bank. And so Andrew Jackson represents, I believe he killed the first national bank, which is now essentially the Federal Reserve.
Mhm.
So there was a big fight on as to because obviously it came up that finances were a huge problem during the Revolutionary War, and we did have a system of government prior to the one that we have now with the states having much more power. And this is why you see in some movies and some books you read that Virginia's at war with England, but South Carolina is not. It's because we couldn't get together. And so rightfully so, the leaders and the thinkers of that age was like, this is an issue. We gotta hash this thing out. And this is my point to just about any issue you run into, you're going to have individuals on different sides of the argument. You could even make I am coming to a place where I believe that you can even be on both sides of the argument from a godly perspective, right? And that's that's what I'm coming to realize is that we're called to be in the tension between those two arguments, whatever they are, right? Loving your enemy is loving the other side of the argument and seeing what they're saying and having the compassion, the empathy, ultimately you won't maybe necessarily be convinced of their argument, but you can at least understand it. You can at least see it from their perspective.
Yeah, the English have a way of expressing this. I take your point. I don't agree with you, but I understand that from your perspective, you would think this and feel that, and whatever. But I think essentially the problem is that people don't care about the arguments. It's like, well, the stupid and the moronic and the ignorant. Well, they're more than us, so we better shut up then. We better have to tell them lies and somehow through stick and carrot get them to do what we want. It's like, well, why don't we just reward people who win arguments using sound reasoning? Why don't we just reward that again instead of saying, but because you cry louder and harder, we have to listen to you because you've thrown yourself on the floor and you're having a tantrum and therefore we have to submit to you. I mean, surely it should be, well, let's have a discussion about it.
I think the founding fathers were trying.
It's because of the female vote. Sorry?
I mean, yeah, I've heard that argument. I can see where they're coming from, but I don't necessarily subscribe to it. My wife has a vote in the decisions and what we do, and sometimes she has a higher say in what we're doing, and sometimes I have a higher say. Sometimes, very rarely, does my son have a higher say, but he can at least bring a different perspective to the argument to make sure that we're making the best decision as a team. And I do believe that the type of government that we had was trying to address that problem that you just spoke of, right? So let's put ourselves back in the late 1700s. How does somebody who spends their entire life farming know anything about world politics and cultivating a relationship with France, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was an idea.
Most people don't even understand their own history, let alone, the histories of countries they would never visit. Of course, and foreign policy has a direct impact on you if you've lost a war, as the British have discovered. They didn't win World War One. They didn't win World War Two. They lost their empire after picking two fights with Germany. And history, it's on record that on both occasions they declared war on Germany. it was, and the Germans were saying, "Hey, we didn't even want you to fight. We didn't want to fight you." And of course, we had to go through Belgium to, punch the lights out of France. And in 1870, we did exactly that, and you didn't even give a damn about the French. So why are you making a fuss about it now? Britain in 1914. And there was no answer. They had to go all the way back to the Treaty of London, 1839, to say, oh, in that treaty, we guaranteed Belgian neutrality. So that's why we're fighting you. And the thing is, everybody goes to Belgium to fight because it's a boxing ring of Europe. They're not going to be fighting in, the French Pyrenees or the mountain regions. Everybody wants a fight. If they want to have a fight, they go to the car park, right? They go to the car park or they go to a fighting ring where it's flat. And the Low Countries, i.e. Belgium and Holland, that's the best way for you to, organize your army. So, and I think the real reason why the British picked a fight with the Germans was because of the Berlin to Baghdad railway. That was not how I learned history. It was, only recently that I discovered it. That was a real reason, and the Germans innocently asked for British investment, like, well, it'll pay off, and of course, the British didn't like it at all because
Do
it
you
would
think if
bypass.
there were smarter, more rational men sitting atop that government that they wouldn't have made that bad decision?
Of course, but Washington warned in his farewell speech. He way back then he said, "Do not let the military-industrial complex." He said military establishment um, get too powerful because it would be threatening to Republican liberty or words to that effect. So he knew way back then that this would be the problem because
Well, that's why
if
we
they're
have the
too
Second
powerful.
Amendment. That's why we have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was supposed to be the counter to if that took place, right? It was supposed to be the counter to if the government ran amok, not even amok. Let's give them credit. If the government did its job very, very well, that it would have the potential to be able to then turn that power inward on its citizenry. And that was the whole reason for the right to free speech. So we could speak out against it, so we could call it out early to attempt to correct it, which is why we have the 60% rule. Because if enough people, right, felt like this is something that needs to happen. But again, to your point, I think in order for that kind of system to work, you have to have, first of all, people who are going to participate and be involved in the process, care enough about the process, and care enough about the whole to be able to sacrifice themselves back into it in order to make it to continue to work. And to
And
your point, I don't think there's enough people that do it, which is why we have kind of fallen into a more democratic way of doing things where we use the vote of public opinion or where we shuffle our dollar bills to determine what the elites are doing.
yeah,
I also,
so you get a dollar bill a vote. Every dollar gets a vote,
yeah, I've
which is
been
a
making that argument.
plutocracy
Yeah, I've been making that
and not
argument
a
for a long time
democracy.
that that's the kind of system of government we have. You choose with your dollar bills. Now, to be fair, we are turning into more of with stuff like this. We are turning more into an attention economy, and I think that I really like the way Jordan Hall kind of describes it, where we're moving into, I guess, fifth generational warfare, where it's inherently more spiritual. But as you make these moves, like for instance, your idea that if we had smarter people making the decisions, we could avoid the pitfalls that we've made in the past. Just by making that move, you're opening up the world of possibility in that seed to have the smartest people making all the decisions. And then once the smartest people are in those positions, it already makes an elite. And then once you're separated from the rest, you become detached, and then you can become tyrannical. So, in the seeds of the idea to the fix of the problem is the antithesis of that as well. And that's what we
Well,
must
you
all
don't have to be.
go ahead.
Well, okay. I think what the problem most of us feel is that the elite are neither competent nor honourable, and they're actually stupid, and what they're doing is harming their own interests, and they don't seem to realise it. I think that that's a problem. I mean, if we sort of respected them and thought they were doing something, that might even work in their own favour. But I don't think, members, the people who are in the ruling classes, present themselves as competent and knowledgeable. We're wondering if they haven't already gone mad. Certainly with the Europeans, because there is no reason at all for any European to support the war in Ukraine, because it's whenever there's a war in Europe, it turns into a world war. So any rational European with any understanding of their own history, and you would expect the elites to know this, they're getting themselves further into debt to pay for the war in Ukraine. So it makes no sense to ordinary Europeans. We're not allowed to, well, I suppose we do say the sort of thing, on social media platforms, but this is not what legacy media is repeating, because legacy media is completely controlled.
We played with the idea of kayfabe for a while. And
Perhaps you'll explain to some
So
my British listeners what it is.
yeah, so kayfabe is like the idea that everybody knows that the thing is not real, and they're playing different roles. A perfect example of it, this was coined by Eric Weinstein, in that in the WWE, they pretend that it's real, that all the relationships in wrestling, this is like American
Oh,
wrestling.
it's like a Punch and Judy show. Have you heard of a Punch and Judy? Well, it's a puppet show at seaside resorts for children. So it's basically one person, and Punch and Judy are a couple, and they fight each other, and the puppeteer does different voices, and the children think Punch and Judy are separate people, but it's controlled by one puppet. Maybe the British expression of this would be, politics is a Punch and Judy show for little children.
So I bring that up to say how much of the incompetence that you spoke of, that many people have a sense that the elite are in that, how much of that is them actually being incompetent, and how much of it is them doing the Punch and Judy show for everybody?
I guess we'll never really know, but if you are rewarded for being incompetent, then why wouldn't you be incompetent? It's easy to be incompetent rather than competent, right? And I'm afraid there is. Okay, I think feminism has lowered standards of education and behaviour. It has totally inverted the hierarchy of society, and that's how you get this thing called intersectionality. I don't know if you've heard of that. Intersectional feminism is basically you raise the status of the person who is. I mean, there's a sort of archetypal person who benefits, and it would be somebody who's black and disabled and lesbian, because the female is more disadvantaged than the male, so she, in this twisted inverted system, gets a higher status. If she's disabled, she gets a higher status than the able-bodied, and if she's not white, then so this hypothetical disabled lesbian black woman will have a higher status than married white men.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
No, I
something
agree with that.
Alan Dershowitz himself said is threatening to Jews because, I suppose some Jews identify with, patriarchy and married fathers.
No, I think that's I think that's something real. I I would make the argument that that comes more from it's the natural next move when you're dividing up the population into voting blocks. So if you're trying to get the white Christian vote, if you're trying to get the urban black vote, or if you're trying to get, like, name your different demographic. And to be totally fair, I think this was an interesting way to find out what the people needed in terms of leadership, right? I think that, if I would guess, again, the seed comes in, the seed comes in, and it has, at the moment it breaks to create something new, it also, not only is it creating the new thing, but it's also creating the potential for many more different things to happen. So I think that in an effort, like, just to give our politicians from an earlier era the benefit of the doubt, let's kind of say that they really wanted to solve problems, and they really didn't have a good way of determining how to figure out what those problems are. So they started dividing up the country into different voting blocks to see what issues rise to the top when you kind of pull out the different things. But then as that becomes a more and more just a simple tool to win votes, right? Now the things become speaking points instead of actual policy, because they just want to stay in power, right? That's kind of how I sense that whole intersectionality kind of thing. And that's not to say that there aren't, people that fall under those things and feel themselves to be, however they feel themselves to be. At the end of the day, we're all individuals uniquely created by God. So respect and dignity should be, love thy neighbor. But
Yes, of course. And this idea of equality is a liberal idea. And it's also stated in the US Declaration of Independence about, man being created equal. But then even that is controversial. Does this include women? Does this include, men of
and we've been hashing that out
non-white
in this
races?
experience since then. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And so, basically my position is that the founding fathers were proto-Muslim because really they still believed in God, right? They might say, well, I'm not Christian. I don't quite agree with the Trinity. I'm a Unitarian, as Thomas Jefferson definitely was. But I don't know if you've spoken to Sam Titterman. I mean, his latest thing was that his children were having a bad time because he sent them to a Trinitarian church, and of course, I guess the other churchgoers there have discovered his Unitarian position and don't quite approve or agree. But I suppose it could be said that Thomas Jefferson was a heretic, and in Europe, under the according to the story of the Socinian controversy, Unitarian Christians were treated as heretics, and pretty soon they were, stamped out in Poland. So, but of course, in America it was a different thing altogether. But then, even the Trinitarians have called each other heretics, right? The Catholics and the Protestants and the Orthodox Christians. So I don't think any. I mean, if you're going to judge which church is the most powerful, I guess it would have to be the Episcopalians, because the Church of England supports a monarchy that still controls quite a lot of territory in different parts of the world. in that Canada, Australia, New Zealand are really technically still British.
I follow the line of your argument. I would probably have to say the Roman Catholic Church would be they're by far the largest.
But they lost the wars of the Reformation because
Mm-hmm. I know.
after the Spanish American War.
Yeah, they're still the largest though.
But in terms of numbers, you know, Monroe Doctrine, America's backyard, really, America controls South America, really. Panama Canal, Venezuela, and
Mm-hmm. No, I think we have just by the nature of being the most powerful thing on this side of the globe, we're always going to, rightly or wrongly, exert power in our local, region, because there's no opposing force to keep us in check. That eventually, power begets power, and all the things that we're guilty of as imperfect creatures will eventually rise to the surface. And I think that manifests itself in all the layers,
yes,
including
yeah,
governmental.
yes. But I was thinking in terms of wasp supremacy was not a term that I made up. It was something I heard, and that was kind of the common understanding of American identity, because I guess even having a Catholic president was, in a way, unprecedented, judging from
Mhm.
the way people were talking about JFK. So, but the thing about the church is that ultimately it has to submit to secular power, because we might think the Catholic Church is, obviously more ancient than the Protestant churches, but really Catholicism has been losing power over the centuries, because it used to be part of the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire declined and fell. But the Catholic Church managed to persuade the barbarian kings of Europe to adopt Roman Catholicism, because I suppose they said, well, Roman Catholicism is more glamorous and more powerful than Celtic Christianity or whatever it was that the local barbarian kings were using. And I know there was a big discussion about when Easter is supposed to have begun and which calendar to use or something, and
Rabbit hole.
yes, and eventually all the barbarian kings of Europe decided to adopt Catholicism, and we can understand why they might do that, because well, I can't prove it, but I imagine the Christian missionaries will say, well, if you don't convert to Roman Catholicism and we convert your neighbors to Roman Catholicism, we're going to come and get you, and you'll have to convert to Roman Catholicism anyway. So jump before you're pushed, and that might explain why Europe soon became Roman Catholic, and then after learning how to read and write, these barbarian kings had some, education to make. I mean, to realize that the Pope in Rome was only a politician, and nothing, and there was nothing particularly holy about him. So that might be, a slow dawning realization that didn't really kick in until Henry VIII and Martin Luther. But I suppose this was inevitable once you learned a bit of Greek and Latin and understood your own history, and you could read and write, and so
Understand the folly of man, no
yeah,
matter what robes they wear.
and
Right. We're all uniquely created and individualistic, but we're also in so many ways just the same, right? We keep making the same mistakes, the same blunders throughout history. I mean,
We
we
don't
call
know
them
what's good
different
for us.
names, but we call them different things. We call them different names. We choose to make different focuses on even history based on what we believe, right? So we could there, and people are still doing this, right? Looking at the same situation in history and coming up with two totally different understandings of what it was. Um, it's it's it basically comes down to, for me, that no matter what structure you put on top of it, we're putting it on top of a world that have imperfect men and women, people. And so as the structures grow and build, even if they have a good and well-intentioned mission and goal, that eventually they will become corrupted. It's just in my mind, that's just the natural kind of cycle of things.
Oh,
Because
sure.
right, and so we're just looking at history and how we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over again. That was one of the most frustrating things for me when I was, you know, because I don't know if I was questioning my faith. I was wrestling with it at one time in my life. Well, that's probably not true either. It was probably multiple times in my life where I've been doing this like reassessment of where I am and where I'm going, and am I do I fall under the grace for which I've been given freely to accept or decline? And as I do that, I am astounded not only in the world but in myself how I keep making the same mistakes. How we're called to be transformed into something, which I think is like what people do in society. We recognize that there's not a good, and we attempt to fix that good. And we use all the tools available to us, but ultimately our structures end up becoming, to use a Peugeotian term, they become tyrannical. They become rigid and hard and
Yes, because,
mechanistic.
but it's only because people don't really want to fix their problems if it means going against the established order. They have to think within the box, because if they think outside the box, they will be identified as heretics and revolutionaries, and they're going to get into trouble, and they prefer to stick with the herd. But I think there is a solution to every problem, at least in theory. In theory, there is a solution. Whether it's going to happen in our lifetime, of course, that's another question. But just by paying attention to the meaning of words, I think we can get there, because I guess I'm one of those people who think I have the solution, but nobody wants to even talk about it. Because, yes, of course, we can all keep repeating our mistakes, but when we get tired enough of them, we will think, how can I stop myself from, doing the stupid thing? If you keep tripping over, a carpet or something in your home, maybe you'll get some sticky tape to make it, not, have bumps that might trip you over. There are tapes that will stick your carpet in your living room, so it doesn't, kind of, there's always a solution, and people might not, want to run against their taboos. I know democracy is a kind of sacred religious idea. Even atheists have, sacred cows. I really think that, if most atheists will just regard their own opinions and beliefs as sacred, and I guess the danger of it is that since they accept no higher authority, they can only be moved by violence or lies or bribes. And that is fundamentally the problem. But if you sort of say, well, we're all supposed to believe in God in this country, and this is the mainstream um, belief, And if you're going to have your own funny way of working things out, then I'm afraid you'll be ostracized and mocked, whatever. But we still have a bit of well, America is still officially one nation under God, trusting in God. It still, it's not a forgotten, extinct idea, and it could be revived and discussed because, which God is it that we're talking about? Surely it's the Abrahamic God and not the God of Spinoza.
I mean, I think people have different opinions on what that is. I don't.
But these arguments can be won, I think. Why would you worship a God that doesn't care about you, which is the God of Spinoza? He was a pantheist who equated God with the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't subscribe to it myself, but why would you? I mean, if and I'm not familiar with it, but most of the time people subscribe to things because it's what they believe they should either be allowed to do or allowed to participate or allowed to behave in a certain way.
Mhm.
And so they find the thing that allows them to behave the way they feel like is best. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
and we have
ultimately, I think
laws.
that's the reason why people do the thing. But it's no different than a to use the atheist. I mean, the atheist believes that the pinnacle thing is our human capability to rationalize a problem. And while I think that's extraordinarily beneficial, and that I most oftentimes run my programming through that lens, what is the rational thing to do? I'm also extraordinarily aware from my own experience and my own understandings of the things that I've learned, both in an irrational way and an experiential way, that there's another side to things that I don't understand fully that make itself very, very known in my life. And so, for the atheist, they maybe don't have that experience. They, and so that world isn't open to them.
Well, it can be easily explained, in my view.
Okay.
So, it would be logical for me if I saw that you have something that I want to take it from you. If I'm bigger than you and stronger than you, it would be logical. It would also be logical for me to kill you if I thought you might complain and go to the cops and sue me in court or whatever. It would be logical, but it wouldn't be moral. And that is really I guess my kind of holy trinity. Whatever I believe in has to be undisputed. It has to be true. The premise, that I'm acting on must be um, conforming to reality. Um, the argument I'm using must be sound and not illogical, and it mustn't also be immoral. And that's it. And then I think I have won the argument. I know that's not how people think, but I can't think of a better system.
I think that's fair. I think that that's a great attempt to be to exude justice in your way of thinking. Uh, I don't see anything wrong with that.
and, and,
I
and therefore the next stage is to for all these academic philosophers who apparently don't have jobs and wait at tables and work in blue collar jobs because nobody's interested in philosophy graduates. You would have thought they be discussing, well, what is morality, what is good, what is evil, but there seems to be no sign of it, because really that is what we need to know. Because obviously when we have these political arguments, people are going to say, I am right and you are wrong, you are evil and I am good, and I will kill you to make my point, which is kind of where it's come to, really, with civil disorder.
Well, I think that's because everybody has I shouldn't say everybody, but I would say that there are different moral frameworks. right? What you think is moral may not be what the atheist sees as moral. I don't think that. I think part of what we were experiencing during the last decade or so was that question: what is considered moral? Right, and that argument's been getting itself played out in the open. Right.
Well, exactly, and so the focus on the meaning of particular words is so important. So, I think even atheists can agree that there should be laws forbidding murder and theft.
But we can't because we're still having debate. I shouldn't say still, the debate over something like abortion is essentially that moral argument. When is it
Well,
okay to use deadly force? Is it okay
but
to use
the
deadly
law is
force
established.
during or after, or can the state do it if you've been witnessed by 3 people committing an act of murder? Right? These are all moral questions that are being
Well, the
played
thing
out
is,
all the
I
time.
think it's still a crime in America, isn't it? I mean, nobody's saying it's okay to kill people in America.
Well, I would make the argument that that's what abortion is. It's where's the
Um,
line for it to be okay to kill human beings? And we're having an argument over where the line of becoming human is.
well,
Is
there
the
is
line of
a
becoming human
legal.
at conception, or is it after passing through the birth canal?
Well, the legal distinction that operates now is if it's not yet born, it's not a person, it's only a fetus. And that's why you have the practice of partial birth abortion. You kill you crush its skull while it's still in the mother, and then it's just abortion. Because if it comes out and you kill it, it's infanticide, and that's a crime. That's
Well,
how lawyers think. But
and I agree with that. I'm just saying that the question of whether or not that is moral is being played out. Because I
well,
mean, you
I
even
think
used the vulgar language of crushing the skull. So I get the sense that you think that it's morally incorrect to do the thing just by the
well,
way you
it's
use your language.
distasteful, isn't it? Because it is just showing you the thin line between infanticide and abortion. The legal um, distinction is, well, people disagree, but I think it's still a question of sexual
That's the
morality.
thing.
But it pertains to sexual morality, right? It's like, well, it's not married mothers who are queuing up for their abortions. It's unmarried mothers.
Let me ask you this question. If abortion wasn't an option, how many more mothers would be pursuing that as a viable option?
Well,
Do you think
I'm
more
saying,
or less women would pursue the holy covenant of marriage if abortion wasn't an option for unholy? And I'm using these words on purpose to be a little bit like line driven, but I don't mean anything, you know, again, people are people. But if if the abortion was not an option for women as a form of birth control, do you think more or less women would pursue marriage in that scenario?
well, yes. So what the culture is that of casual sex, that we are free beings. We could, it's fine to have sex with anyone, not our spouse or even, members of the same sex, because the sky doesn't fall in when we have sex with somebody not our spouse. And this is how a lot of atheists think. It's a victimless crime, right? But eventually you will find yourself, an aging and shrinking society, complaining about uncontrolled mass immigration and being replaced. So eventually, the cows will come home, and you will realize what you have done to yourselves, with the culture of casual sex, which is now a behavioral addiction. But what I'm proposing is actually very simple to administer. I will remain neutral about abortion because people will say, "Oh, what about rape? What about incest? What about
No,
all these kinds of
right.
things?" So I'm saying deal with the problem on the supply side, i.e., deal with the problem um, with the suppliers of sex, and that would be the female sex. And you imply that if abortion were not widely available, more women would keep their legs crossed, wouldn't they? Surely.
Maybe.
That was what you
I'm
were,
just proposing the question in the stance of morality, because you said
or just a kind of, um, you know, most people are not, moral philosophers. They'll do whatever the law allows them to do. And if you, tell them to stop and there's no law against it, they'll say there's no law against it. It's a free country. And, I will, I will be having, I'll be screwing around, and there's no law against that. So I think, but the law could easily say, you see, in America, you still call your marriage certificates marriage licenses, and this is very useful because it means what does it mean? It means you can't have sex unless you're married. You certainly can't have children. That was the traditional idea. The whole purpose of marriage is for legitimate children, and because the corollary of that was that if you have illegitimate offspring, you would be socially ostracized. If you're female, your father would kick you out of the house, and you would, end up working in a brothel. It wasn't an ideal situation for a woman. While a man could skip town after he knocked up some woman, there's no advantage in a woman on her own arriving in a new place with heavily pregnant without a man to provide for her and protect her. So it is very different for between a man and a woman, and these differences should have not disappeared.
I think you're making in my, just to bring this back to the rationality plus the morality and the way you framed the world, right? That was another moral argument that has shifted over time, right? The moral argument prior to that was, you're supposed to only have sex within the constitutes of marriage, and if you don't, there's consequences. I can just imagine an individual back then saying something to the effect of, you allowed Satan to come into you and open yourself up to that man, so you're getting the consequences which you deserved, right? I can see somebody saying that to the woman back then, that now you have to and look, I think my heartstrings go out to the individual that's facing that situation even today, because it's still the same moral question today. Maybe you don't get the town baker refusing to sell you your daily bread because of the sins that you've made. The sins that you've made's a bad word. The sins that you've manifested into the world and is going to be represented by that child. We don't have that. But I think the arguments that are being made are essentially the same today as they were back then. And so,
yes, because marriage is a eugenic.
Way the two, you're going to get differences. You're going to get people that put a different moral framework on top of their rationality.
But the law is the final frontier of what is permissible, isn't it? So if there's a law against, whatever, we don't want to be punished by the law, for whatever thing. So it's the lowest standard, because obviously the higher standard is we don't even think of doing it, or we think of doing it, but we don't actually do it. But, if we go ahead and kill someone and steal stuff, we should be punished because that's what the law says should happen to, murderers and thieves. So the law should be clearer, but it isn't because of the whole setup of representative democracy. Because the the pollsters, they already know that the biggest group of voters that is most volatile is a female voter. So if you offer them freebies, if you promise to protect them from their own stupidity, you're going to get the vote. And as a result, over the years, the interests of men who might have gotten married have been salami sliced away until men these days say, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? Why
Most
why buy a house for a woman you hate? They say
the young
cynical.
men today aren't even getting the milk. They're not, and this is the female side of the argument for the young people, is that there's no men out there, and what makes a man, right? And they're not
He
finding
needs to be a provider, and then we'll put up, women
No,
will
I
put up
agree
with
with
all
that.
your
Yeah,
crap
they're
if you
not
pay the
cultivating
bills.
themselves to be that.
And if
But
you
the
pay
men
the bills,
are cultivating themselves to be that. The men
yeah,
are shirked up, hanging out, pursuing
dropping
their own
out.
interest.
dropping out. So when men drop out to claim their UBI, I guess they're happy to become extinct because the bribe of UBI is that we'll give you just enough to play your video games and eat your Cheetos and masturbate to porn, but you won't form the intention to find a woman to have children with, and that's what we want you to do. That's basically what they're saying to us. And if you're not gone by a certain time, we'll keep periodically offering you the option of assisted suicide. That's what they're doing now. It's pretty blatant, I think.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I would even go as far as to say it's demonic.
Yes,
It's Satan going, look, if you're given free choice, if the entire menu of hedonism is on the plate for you, you being the human race, it's almost like, sometimes I think about it like this, is that this is Satan accusing all of humankind at once, that you guys don't live up. I am right by leading an army of angels from heaven because God chose you over us. And I'm going to show God that you will make the wrong choice and I'm right, that you can't rise up. You can't choose light. You're too dark. You lovers of the darkness. If given the opportunity, you will choose it.
yes, yes, and
That's what I
and
think is playing out with all this stuff. And then we're going to even let you choose to off yourself, right? With the assisted
yes,
suicide.
and you will choose to do this because you think that
But
your life is your own, and you can choose to do whatever you like with it.
you
But
will
actually, the
choose the
Quran
most evil
tells,
thing possible.
yeah, and the Quran does
Mhm.
actually have Allah saying, "Do not kill yourselves or each other." But you know,
Mhm.
people who do kill themselves
I
are
think that's
obviously not thinking of God.
I think that's what we're seeing, and it's a sad state. But I don't think the solution, just to bring it all the way back to this. I mean, even thinking about this from a rational, moralistic framework, I don't think the answer is governmental as making that the highest thing. I think the highest thing is changing hearts and minds to say that, yep, you've done some pretty horrible stuff in your life. And it's not okay. You should try to turn away from those things. You should repent. And you can repent. but you can't repent on your own. You're not going to be able to rationalistically, moralistically pull yourself out of it. You're going to need help, and that's what I think Christ offers. I think Christ offers an
Collective
option.
repentance. It's
What's
possible,
that?
isn't it? I mean, there is a story of Jonah and the Ninevites.
Mm-hmm.
The Ninevites repented and were saved.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's possible. But that was God's work. God's work came through one man in Jonah.
And he didn't
He
even
had to
want to
create
do
a
it.
whole way in order for that offer from God to be given to the Ninevites.
Yeah, and Jonah didn't even want to do it. He went the other way, right? Because he didn't like them and he didn't want them saved.
This was
But
something that Chad and I were talking about the other morning. It's despite our wickedness and our evilness, we're still going to attempt to not be Jonahs. We're going to attempt to do that. We're going to listen. We're going to hear. We're going to try to make the changes within us. And even as we stumble and fall and make a mess of it, God's still going to use it for somebody's benefit. And if it's for somebody's benefit, it's also for my benefit. And it's
yes,
also for God's benefit. I think actually, I just thought of that. And I think that's a beautiful picture of the Trinity. That's us participating in the Trinity. God's perfect. God's telling me to do something. I'm imperfect. And right there is the slap in the face of Satan's accusation to our societies right now.
yes, I think it's possible to interpret all these restrictive laws as an attempt to help us keep ourselves in existence, right? And in a way, it doesn't. I mean, and the Jews are an interesting lot because they're known not to to relapse into idolatry and worship other gods, and this is basically the part of their identity, as well as the identity of taking a very strong position against idolatry. But the point is that they're still around because they have this religion that keeps them around to suffer or be elevated, I guess, if they're doing it properly. And
what about improperly? What if you're doing it improperly?
well,
What if you're a Jonah?
The thing is, Jonah was forced. In the end, he realized he had no choice but to do as God commanded.
No, I
Because
think that's the beautiful thing about the story is that he ultimately chooses. Right? God's like, look, dude, I'm going to have this fish swallow you up and spit you out right where I want you to be. But I also have a sense that Jonah, having now found this thing, totally 100% believes. Because the story's short, but I would imagine that Jonah spent months as a stranger into a new land, an enemy even, in a new land, trying to preach the story of repentance. Right? That probably didn't happen in 2 sentences like it did in the Bible. Right? I would imagine more. And I think that Jonah had to experience the time on the boat and being thrown off and swallowed by the whale and shipwrecks to be able to fortify what was needed for him to accomplish the mission that God called him to do, as to go into an enemy land and prophesize.
well, yes, I suppose he was, I guess. Well, he
The
did
law
have a bit
doesn't
of a
prevent that. If
Hmm?
anything, law prevents that because Jonah's got to make the mistakes.
Yeah, and then he thought, I better not stay on this vessel because then everybody would get drowned. I guess I
Get to
better kill
choose that.
myself and jump off it.
Right. He didn't get to choose that either. But I think I heard Neil say this. There's something to be appreciated about yet having all the ways to fail, sin, corrupt thyself, when you have all those things perfectly available to you and then you choose not to?
Well, I suppose he
Something
heeded his
more
moral imperative.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was thinking, perhaps there was a little voice in Jonah's head saying, if I stay on this ship, everybody will get drowned because, God is clearly trying to punish me. So I better just drown myself so at least, I wouldn't be such a bad guy that I, A, disobeyed God and got all these people drowned who were, innocent people anyway. And I guess God rewarded Jonah and said, well, no, now you're going to do what I want, won't you? And reluctantly, Jonah had to do it.
Yeah, but he still chose, right? And that's kind of like this beautiful dance that takes place between imperfect man and perfect God, right? It's beautiful. It's sad. It's gut wrenching. I mean, imagine the pride Jonah's got to just. He's been raised his whole life to believe these people are just the epitome of what Satan has to offer to the world, right? And he's got to flip that to do the will of his Father. And in that moment, that's where the kingdom of heaven pierces through the veil and enters into this physical manifested world.
Yes, so in the Quran it says God will not destroy a civilization without having given them due warning. He's not going to just zap them and, without, say, hey, you done wrong, you better change your ways or else, blah, blah, blah. And I suppose the story of Jonah makes a point that you can repent at any stage, even if Jonah hates you and thinks you deserve extinction. If you do repent before your account is closed, so to speak, then you will be saved from extinction in this life. And so there is this idea of a U-turn, right? You're heading towards a cliff, but once you think, oh, I might be going the wrong way, and maybe I don't want it to end up on the rocks below, then you can always turn back. But obviously before you've, thrown yourself off the cliff. And this, I think, must be, can be enormously comforting.
Well, so I was thinking to our earlier parts of the conversation with the solutions to the problems we face. Notice Jonah fixed the problem of a horrible society through his first deciding to repent. Because Jonah had to be the first repenter, because he did not believe that he should do what he should do. And once he made the flip, he was then able to, and that's essentially what I feel like is going to be the fix. If there's going to be a fix for society, it's going to be individuals making the decision to repent. That's
or
what
a collective
call was. That's what Christ's call was. That's what all the stories in the Bible are. From my mindset, is stories of repentance, of people changing their mind. Abraham, we'll use Abraham. He had to repent. He was laying up in his father's tent, living the good life. His father, from all accounts that I can see, was a successful man. He had to repent from the idea that he is going to lay up and rest on his laurels, right? Living under his father's tent, and go out and make his own life. So he had to repent. Like every story is a story of repentance, of changing your mind, of making the decision that the thing I hold the dearest in my mind and in my heart may not be what God is telling me to do, or telling me to believe, or telling me to, you got to be willing to, and I think this is the left's argument, is that you need to be open. I do think it's gone a little far and gone into circus land, maybe a lot far, but nonetheless, that's the argument that they're making, is that if you stay rigid in the structures that are in place, you won't learn anything new.
We mustn't be stiff-necked people and be prepared to change our ways in the light of new information.
If you're losing the battle, you have to move troops. If you're all of it, it's a story of repentance. It's a story of not being too proud, of understanding that I'm not in control of everything. I could do everything right and still have bad outcomes. Ugh, that
Yes.
one just drives a wedge in me. I hate that. I
And
hate
how
the
do you know you're doing anything right?
That's just
How?
it. I mean,
Yeah.
you learn, you're pursuing, you're wrestling.
How
And
do you know
wrestling
you're following the
is,
right instructions?
well, that's where I get that reassurance from both my time studying the word and in my time with prayer. That's where attention is important. If I'm not ever looking in those places, I won't ever know. So you stay there, and then the word becomes bread, and it becomes me, because I'm eating and feasting on that, and that's how it becomes embodied. That's the whole orthos kind of perspective, the Eastern Orthodox perspective. You have to ingest the living word, and then it becomes part of you, and then because it's part of you, it gets manifested into the world, and then you become that turning point, right?
Yes, I guess you have to take the word seriously, whatever you think the word might mean.
But
And
yet
most
still be
people
open to the
already
fact
think
that
they
you could be wrong,
know.
while still being opening to the fact that you could be wrong.
And the only way of showing that you think you could be wrong is by leaving the channels of communication open instead of dismissing the other person and say, so and so is not worth talking to. I
That's
am
right.
right and, he is wrong and, whatever. And people eventually, well, some people anyway, they're capable of changing their mind, years later maybe, but, it's, in theory.
That's all the crack that's needed most of the times. Just that little crack of realizing that I don't know everything.
And if
What
you're
we're doing
so
right now,
certain,
where is it? What we're doing right now is it.
yeah,
This is
and,
this is it. That's how it spreads.
and if you're so sure you're right, then be prepared to allow others to question your beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's only when we try to explain ourselves, when we try to win our arguments and we can't, and then we have to concede that the other person has won. But if you don't even explain your terms, you won't answer questions, it does mean that you already know you've lost the argument. That's why you won't engage. And I think a lot of censorship is about that. They don't want to answer questions and they don't want to argue about it.
That's where it becomes dogmatic, and that's where a lot of the complaints with the blue church, the term blue church comes from that. It's because it's just people dogmatically reciting the chants, reciting the slogans, doing the ceremonial, look, we're out here because we care so much, look at our signs, look at our nice hats, or whatever else. It's very ritualized, right? But it's because I would use a different word other than beliefs. I would use faith, because the belief structures are our attempts to try to codify that which we have faith in. But if the thing that we have faith in is both in the world but not of the world, I can never fully understand it. Right?
Well, there is this life and there is the afterlife, if you believe in that sort of thing. And then there are what we're supposed to do to get to the better place, right? That's a bargain if we're going to take the whole thing seriously. So it's like, well, what are the rules? And if you can't agree on it, then maybe you need to think again. And if
Maybe
the
you can
people,
play in it. Maybe you can still play in it even if you don't know the rules.
how can
Maybe
you be sure you're, you know,
you can't.
you're correct? I mean, it's sort of like you're driving. You there must be a speed limit, right? And if you're driving under the speed limit, at least you have the serenity while you're driving that you're not going to get a ticket. The cops are not going to tell you to stop. But if you're going, just at the speed limit, you think, well, I might go over it inadvertently, right? And then I'll get a speeding ticket. But there used to be a rule that you can go 20 miles over the speeding limit on the highway before you get into any trouble. But now the rules have changed a little. Have they changed with all the speed cameras? But
I
but
don't
I
think
remember.
I don't
Uh,
think
uh,
I don't think the rules have changed. I think the rules have been in place forever. We're just recycling the same questions over and over again. And they're all moral questions. And I think
yes. So
doing
we
that
need to.
because Satan's playing the same game against all of humankind. It's the same story over and over again. This is why you have similar stories throughout different cultures. It's because it's the same story. It's the
Yes,
same.
because we want to stray. We think we can get away with breaking the rules.
Why do we? Well, no. So, okay, maybe.
Well,
Maybe.
like Adam and Eve, they thought they could get away with it and become like God if they ate from
Mhm.
the tree of knowledge and the tree of life.
But
And and in
is it okay to break the rules like say a Joan of Arc?
FAFO, as some people say.
Yeah, yeah. But what if you're doing that for God? Like, you know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
there is a renewing spirit that takes place when the structures become calcified. That you have to break the rule. I mean, how much was Jesus a rule breaker? I mean, he's telling his disciples like in the synagogue, he's breaking the rule to heal the lame hand, the crippled man on the Sabbath. That was a rule. Rule was in place. But what happened as the structure got calcified? It forgot why the rule was there in the first place, right? It forgot the spirit of the rule. It forgot the thing. And this is why I find it harder and harder to quote unquote believe in an afterlife. I if I think of what happens after death, it's that the veil that's preventing us from seeing the spirit world that goes on forever and ever and ever, right? Is torn away through death, right? It's removed. And so it's not going to be this is why in Revelations it says the new heaven and the new earth will come from above. And I think that's why we're called to be. I mean, the DDJ. I've been considering strongly about studying that moving forward over the next month or so. It was how the original Christian. I shouldn't say original Christian church, but it's how the immediately church fathers after the apostles set up how to do the church. And they recited the Lord's Prayer 3 times a day. And I've been working on doing that. I've pretty consistently got it to twice a day, but in there it's thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven's already there in the now. And our job is to bring it into the world
By improving government.
through repentance.
Yes, and
Through
and
my
if we,
individual for my individual Joan,
yeah,
Jonah, excuse me, right? I have to make the decision to repent. And then through that, God uses that for me to get other people to repent. It's through
yeah,
the hearts of men.
But I think the afterlife is important, or believe in the afterlife, or a claimed believe in the afterlife is important, because if we don't believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished, we won't do the right thing. If we think the sacrifice we make is not going to be rewarded because, if we say or do certain things, we're going to get cancelled or burnt at the stake or whatever, then we might not. And if we think this life is all there is, then we probably won't do the right thing. And I think a lot of people know what the right thing is in theory, but they won't do it because they're not sure if they're going to be rewarded. So I, I mean that's why belief in the afterlife is so crucial to all the five world religions. The Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation. It's this idea that you're going to get a better life if you've been a good boy or a good girl in this life, and a worse life if you be naughty.
Can't forget Santa.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've been,
No,
you've been
look,
wicked.
I think there's levels. I think maybe we're speaking, when I speak of my understanding of heaven, I didn't have it when I was a younger person. I very much had the vision that you are describing. But as I've grown and as I've, learned all my hard lessons, I think about that so much less. It becomes so much less the goal to get to heaven. The goal becomes so much more getting other people the opportunity to get to heaven.
Yeah,
You know,
or doing something because it's the right thing to do, whether you get rewarded or not, which is perhaps nobler because it's
well,
the right thing to do, not because I think I'm going to get rewarded for it. It's arguably more noble than doing it because you expect a reward. But
yes, but I don't think nobility is the reason either. Because and look, I'm really not trying to make myself out to a saint. I'm just trying to describe it the way I see it. Like, as you get closer and closer and closer to God, you start to get a real genuine sense of his real longing to be one with his creation. And as you get closer to that point, it becomes much more, I want to save as many people as I can. I want the world to feel what it's like to be pressed against his bosom and comforted. I want the world, and when I say the world, I'm talking about individuals. I'm talking about just normal people that I get to I, I get to be a part of their lives, and I get to see that they are just like me. They're humans, they're created, they're individualistic, they have their own loves and desires. And the comfort and the peace that comes when you are working in his will is such a sweet thing. But he certainly doesn't call me to, I mean, and he could call some people to live in government. That's not what he's called me to do. He's called me to, you know, be with people that are in need. He's given me the strong desire to want to help people. I used to, when I was much younger, I wanted to be a teacher.
Mhm.
You know, now I've most often described myself now as a fixer. And I see that somebody has a need, and I do my best to bring value to the relationship through offering solutions for fixing their need, whether
Yes, I
that
think we
be,
both have this in common.
yeah, I see it in you. I think that's what some people describe as the divine spark, right? What is the thing in you that has the most impactful or deepest meaning to you? What gets you up out of bed in the morning? Such a simple phrase. but what gets you out of bed in the morning? What allows
Or wanting to fix things.
thing? Yeah, yeah. So, um, I mean, what do you?
And the thing is, it's so easy. The thing is, it's so easy. It's not like, no, you don't have to climb Mount Everest. You just have to say what you believe to be the truth and be open to arguments and admit that you lost the argument when you can't win the argument. And then, subject to that, with a few moral principles, and you're there, really. That's it.
For a moment, what I've noticed throughout my life is you get to the top of one mountain, and the peak in the summit is tiny, and then you descend back into the valley of the shadow of death, and then if you're lucky, you get to climb another mountain. But it's metaphorical mountains. It's difficult. It's weary ridden. You know, it's all the things from, what is it, the Beatitudes, right?
Maybe it's like levels in a video game.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. See, these are all counterfeits. All the things that men strive at that are outside of getting one with the source. They're all just counterfeits, hijacking the thing that we are thinking is meaning. It's hijacking the gifts we've been given from birth, those desires, those things in our personality that get us up in the morning. It hijacks those things, keeps us away, drives a wedge.
Well, we have the moral imperative, and we also have the evil inclination. And we're, I guess, expected to walk the tightrope between the two and get to the right place in the end. And put in these simplistic terms, I hope it is helpful for people inclined to believe in God. But even if you don't, well, I mean, atheists get very insulted if you assume that they are without morality or without principle.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, and I think maybe rightfully so for their. They obviously are putting something at the top of their moral structure to say that they don't have morals. Yeah, I don't agree with that.
But I think that it's just because they don't understand the nature and purpose of religion. Because if you don't have a group ideology, how can you tell which system of morality is better than the others? I think it's called comparative religion, isn't it? I mean, maybe they don't, brutally say, oh, this group is more powerful than this other group. But I think having a more powerful God than the other group kind of helps. And having laws from the most powerful being conceivable also helps, and following the instructions also helps. So, it's not just a matter of being, born to the right parents with the right religion. That there are all these, other steps that one should be conscious of.
I think mostly what you're describing is a peacetime kind of idea of how we determine what the right is, what the moral is. I think a more traditional way of the way the world works, they used to do it through war. This is why they prayed to their gods before they went to war, because they felt like if they won, that was real manifestation in the world that their God is right.
Exactly. So if you were part of a tribe and I were part of a tribe and we went to war, if you won, your God would have won. And if I won, then my God would have won. And, but then I guess eventually, somebody came up with the idea that there's only one God. And then it became, well, who's following, who is most pleasing to this one God? And it must mean whoever is following his laws most correctly. And then it's like, oh, but which laws? And we're kind of there already, I think.
Yeah, No, and I think a lot of people are there. We're either at the start of a new age or the start of the end of all ages, in my mind.
Yes, because if we don't get it right, it could end in World War III.
Yep, yep.
And um,
And then that'll be it. And for individuals like myself that think the spirit world is going to continue to move through, and yeah, I mean, there is a
and
lot of comfort in having the afterlife. To your earlier point, I mean, that's what I just experienced there. You
or
know,
time or history will tell, like, well, who won World War III, and what happened. Um,
if we
you
didn't
know,
extinct ourselves,
yeah.
or as the kids say, unalive ourselves.
Hmm. Hmm. But I suppose the West could be the modern equivalent of Nineveh.
Maybe a lot of people feel that. I at one point felt that.
Well, history does repeat itself, according to Marx.
Yeah, I think that's the big push against what a lot of people in the, the Christian world called hedonism, probably in the Muslim world as well. There's a big pushback now of basically religious folks against non-religious folks. That
Yes.
it's gotten too hedonistic. It's out there. It's in your face. It's you can't do anything without the propaganda being shoved into you. And what do you shield your kids from? And if it's bad for your kids, isn't it obviously bad for yourself? Like, but you want them to participate in the world and not get left behind. You don't
Or
want them to
bad for your
be
descendants.
Amish,
Hmm.
right?
But the thing is, I suppose I just don't want to think of myself as, the 21st century equivalent of an Aztec priest. And I've been thinking about them. It's like,
Hmm.
surely some of them thought, well, maybe we don't have to keep, practicing human sacrifice for the sun to rise again the next day. Maybe the sun will rise anyway without us killing, sacrificing any human beings. And maybe one of those priests actually said that to the other priests. And the other priest said, are you mad? Are you mad? If we admitted that we're wrong, we'll be destroyed. So we have to double down and make even more of them, make even more human sacrifices. And it's because, that there wasn't anything ethical about it, because the whole system was wrong. The whole belief system was wrong, and they wouldn't admit it. And and I think, and in the end, I guess the people thought, well, the conquistadors are here, maybe they'll give us better government than what we've enjoyed so far, or what we've suffered so far, I should say.
The story, as I understand it, is that they had, when the conquistadors came, they were seen as divine creatures. And I even heard a story about an eclipse taking place
Hmm.
right around the same time, and they used that as the conquistadors did, used that as um, evidence for their divinity. And that was one of the
Hmm.
things that kind of took place. And oddly enough, it was kind of true because that's how Christianity got installed into most of South America and North America, was through that. So
Shock and awe.
in an interesting way, that did manifest itself, but it manifested itself differently than I think, because there were people and missions that went into those areas down south. We had the colonies up here. Huh. It's interesting you brought up the Aztecs and all the human sacrifice and the children sacrifice. And I do think you're right. I'm sure there were struggles amongst the leadership of the Aztecs as things were coming down. maybe I'd throw another wrinkle. Maybe they tried to pivot away from it prior to, saw that that didn't work either, and then brought it back in mass, right?
Mm.
To try to hold on to the thing, right? You had a bit of progression in the society. Things started crumbling, and then there was a massive shift back, and they just drove the thing into overdrive. And then that then further perpetuated the end of their civilization because they were getting rid of all their kids.
Well, yes. I mean, if you keep killing people, then they won't grow up to join your army to fight off the conquistadors, right? So it did make sense, even at that level. But I was thinking of, people in a country actually welcoming foreign invaders. It's not unknown because in War and Peace, I only saw the BBC drama series, but there was a scene that I particularly remember. War and Peace is about this Russian family who had a place in the country, and when the French, when the Napoleon's troops were invading Russia, these Russian aristocrats would go to Moscow, and before they left, one of the women said to the peasants that they were leaving behind, "We're sorry that we have to leave you behind to the tender mercies of this Napoleonic army, but we can't take you all with us," and stuff like that. And then the peasant said, "Oh, don't worry about us. We're sure that Napoleon, with his ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, will give us a better deal than you lot." Maybe I misremembered it, but it's and also Britain, who we've left the EU, but obviously there are lots of people who think, no, we don't want any national sovereignty or an independent foreign policy. We just want to be part of the EU because in the short term it gives us, I don't know, just easier access to the rest of Europe or whatever. So in a way that there's no telling with people. People can actually not be acting in their own interest while thinking that they are indeed acting in their own interest. So maybe we don't know what's good for us, and even as empires, we don't know what's good for us, even as imperial overlords, as history has shown us.
Well, I think we do the best we can. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the government that we set up over here. And when I say we, I obviously wasn't in the rooms, but as one who believes that it's a reasonably great structure to have while dealing with the imperfections of man, right? To be able to all the things that you just said, like you're able to have a group of people come together who may have different beliefs and different ideas on how to fix it, but we're going to create a space, right? We're going to create the floor of Congress where we can hash these things out, and there's going to be a group of people that are going to watch the arguments be played out and unfolded, and everybody's going to get to make their own decision, and then we'll tally up and we'll see who wins, to use your terminology. I would say if that system plays itself out well, everybody wins, right?
I certainly think so, and really, I think all we're supposed to do is understand that a republic is closer to a meritocracy than a monarchy. Right, and this was really what made America great. The idea that any man, a commoner, could become the president if he satisfies, certain residential and age requirements. So the idea was that America was a meritocracy, and you could, make your own fortune because, there was nothing to stop you, other than, maybe your own defects of character, tendency to laziness, etc. But the monarchy, a monarchy would be the opposite of a meritocracy, because even if you have a great king now, there's no guarantee that his son is going to be any good. As King Solomon, discovered when he died. I've mixed my metaphors, but his son was no good and split the kingdom in two. And King Solomon was supposed to be the best king of the Jews, and he didn't. He died an idolater because of his many, 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 many wives and concubines.
And I mean, even your country's history shows that. I mean, some of the great things that happen in through the British Empire happened because you had a succession of good kings, right? So you got to actually put forth that progress all the way through for several generations. When you don't get that, then, but I mean, in some weird ways, and maybe this is what you pointed to earlier, with the feeling of some people, in some weird ways, it takes the pressure off by having a king, right? It allows you to hand it over to the divine much easier, right? Because ultimately God decides who sits on the throne. You don't have to have all this time spent sitting in the local body and electing somebody to move up to go to the state body, and then somebody from the state body go into the federal body before your idea as an individual actually gets represented, right? It's a lot easier to just go, you know what, God, take it over, put a king up there. You'll put the king up there, and we'll live our lives however we live our lives. You know what I mean? It's a very easy.
Yeah. We trust in God and we trust in our ruler. But the point about monarchy is that, according to the book of Samuel, God was not happy when the Jews asked him for a king.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently he said, well, you know what a king's going to do? He's going to, send you to die, for his imperial wars, and he's going to tax you. Are you sure? My law's not good enough for you? Because the book of Judges came before the book of Kings, right? And before the Jews got themselves a king, they had judges who would, go around dispensing justice in the kingdom, and Deborah was one of them.
Among other things, because they were imperfect men as well.
Well, yes. I mean, we could be, given the recipe and not follow it because we think we know better. We have the map, but don't like looking it up, even when we're lost, because maybe we don't want to admit to our female passenger that we're lost.
Guilty. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
But I think, the thing that horrifies me is that people just don't remember these lessons. So with regard to monarchy, it's sort of like, well, that was what the founding fathers were rejecting, monarchy, because they obviously didn't agree with Mad King George, who suffered his periodic fits of madness, and also maybe the English were better behaved because their king got executed for his taxes, which he refused to call Parliament about. So after that, after the Restoration, all these English kings thought, we better mind our P's and Q's to avoid what happened to Charles I. And what's interesting about Cromwell was there was this exchange. There's a movie with Alec Guinness in it, and basically the king, played by Alec Guinness, was saying, by what right do you have to try me? Because I am the law. I am above the law. I am your king, and therefore I have to be above the law in order to make the law. And Cromwell had no answer, but he executed Charles anyway. But this means that, well, if you're really, really bad king, you're going to lose a crown through civil war, and it will be by violence. But in the case of American presidents, they can be impeached. So there's a more peaceful way of getting rid of bad presidents of America. But if you have an absolute monarch, then you will have to use violence because there is no other way.
Or submit. There's always a choice. You could submit, or you could play the game, or you can play the game, which many people.
Yeah. But I think what the Muslims do not appear to understand is that the Gulf states are Gulf kingdoms, and the Gulf kingdoms are absolute monarchies. And we know from what happened to William Tyndale, who was burnt at the stake for trying to for translating the Bible into English, because there was some dispute about certain words, and I guess the Catholic Church didn't like him taking away their power by giving away their secret recipe or something, and so they had him executed for daring to translate the Bible into English, and the whole purpose of the whole idea of being king, absolute monarch anyway, is that you can execute people, you can sign their death warrants, and it's not open to question. You can throw people into dungeons without giving a reason, and obviously, if power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and absolute monarchs tend to be absolutely corrupt, as we have discovered from history.
And to be fair, I think I wouldn't doubt, and I don't think many people would, that those same things happen here too. I mean, I'm sure the president of the United States is often people, or at least people powerful enough, or often people that they don't want around anymore. I mean, the technology exists. I think people are getting thrown in jail without the key as well. I mean, I think the Patriot Act opened the door to be able to do that. All they have to do is label somebody a terrorist now, and bye-bye rights.
Yes, so you can have rules and not follow them, and fundamentally, it's still better to have rules so you can tell who is obeying them and who is breaking them.
Right.
It has that, and I think with Jews it's sort of interesting because only half of them are observant Jews, half of them are secular. So we may extract some moral lessons from what's happening to them, because I don't envy them at all, in being kind of conscripted to go and live in Israel to fight for American imperial interests, because that's basically what they've been doing. I mean, I know a lot of Americans think, everything is subordinate to Israel and Jews, but I think Israel is just an American colony and a testing ground for all kinds of, the latest weaponry. And Arabs and Jews are
I would say I think it's just bedfellows. I think it's just who you allow into your bed, and that's countries making those decisions. Are you going to play the game that we're putting forth? Are you going to open yourself to? It's just another level, really. I mean, the Arab kingdoms are they see the world a certain way. They have a resource that the world wants, and they're playing the game that they see is best for them and the people they care about, whether it be the citizenry or not, right? But I mean, shoot, Dubai's a beautiful place. I have not yet been, but I mean, it doesn't seem like only the king is benefiting from what's going on over there, right? And this is how geopolitics works. It's deciding who you let in your bed. I think there's a moral argument for whether or not a country should let a harlot into it, right? And then who is the harlot? A lot of people think of the United States and the West as in general is the harlot. I think that's the way I would not be surprised if most of the Muslim world sees it that way. And it's in part because of the way we are seen to be living our lives in such a hedonistic way. And,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's, but it all goes back to the same thing. I mean, even a country has an opportunity to repent. And I
Hmm.
think you saw that in that story of Jonah, right? The whole city was saved because of
The
repentance.
king repented.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't want to say all this stuff to be doomer or anything. I always think there's hope. I really do. To your point, there's always a time to be able to repent. Um, and it's my job that when I have decided to do that repenting, that I encourage others to do it. And I encourage
Hmm.
others to do it by giving myself, um, by, doing a thing. And I think that's the only way to succeed, by the way. I think that's the only way reality has shown us through all the stories that have made it through time. Those are the ones that make it to the surface, right? Those stories of self-sacrifice and leadership and what is the thing? I mean, I don't see. I mean, the
Yes,
law
and,
is a
and,
good
and the,
thing.
the
Well, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You were saying the law is a good thing.
Yeah, the law is a good thing, but like
Yeah,
Christ,
yeah, because it's necessary.
but ultimately, all it can do is condemn a man. It can't save him. It can only
It needs to
point to
condemn the right man.
well, every man. That's the thing, because none of us can live up to the letter of the law. So it condemns every man. And in some ways, that's what Satan is doing. He's condemning us all. He's pointing to all of our faults.
Well, he's inviting us to break the rules, but we don't. We have minds
Because
of
he
our
knows we
own,
will.
don't we?
Because we'll fail. Nobody lives the perfect life. We
Yeah, we
always
just have to pass the exam, really. First, we have to understand what it is we're supposed to do. And I'm saying, well, we have to know what the law is, and then the many, different legal systems, and we just have to choose the right legal system and the right political system.
Yeah, so that's where me and you would disagree. Because I don't think the solution is in the political system or what law you choose. Ultimately, the law you choose will condemn you. And unless there is a way to garner and to foster and to keep the spirit of repentance alive, right? That you're able to embody the law, to allow the law to live within you. This is the whole my law will
We
be written in your heart.
internalize the principles. I guess
Right.
what you
But in order to do that, sometimes you break the law because the law becomes more calcified. But because you fully understand the spirit of the law, which is the higher level, you can recognize when the law is being misused,
Mhm.
right? And then you can break the law. But it's only in that act. It's not like you're just running around, doing whatever you want to do. It's
And not
understanding.
even realizing that you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I see
that
what you
too.
mean now. So if you
Yeah.
break the law, you should at least know that you're breaking the law. And maybe you see that, yeah, I broke the law. I thought I'd get away with it, but I see why there should be a law against murder, theft, etc.
Well, no, no, no. I'm saying, could you imagine a scenario where you should break the law?
When it's clearly unjust, imposed on you by a tyrant,
Yeah.
and then you might think, let's change the entire system. Because if so many of the laws need to be changed, then obviously the system that the law operates in is wrong. So then you'll have to, propose a changing of the system, which of course a lot of people are going to object to because most people just want to maintain the status quo and they don't want to stick their heads above the parapet because you become a target.
I think that from what I've heard, because I haven't been to England yet, or but I hear that's more of an English cultural thing. Americans don't have a problem sticking their head out and speaking up and being loud and obnoxious about it, no matter where we are. that's, that's that's not a sin that we that
we don't enjoy our First Amendment rights. You see, not even our king enjoys First Amendment rights,
I know.
which makes Britain such a curiosity, and that's why I really do think that the founding of the American Republic was a good thing, whatever it might be now. The ideas were right and noble, but
I think so too. Hmm. I think it's the best
because
system we've seen, but it has become calcified. It has become too rigid. It has the But look, I mean, everybody talks about the wealth gap, but this is a normal process throughout all the cosmos. The biggest galaxies collect the most stars. They have more gravity, it draws it in. Right? In a forest, the tallest trees get the most sunlight.
Mhm.
Like this is a natural way that things move. And that's where I believe ultimately that the divide that takes place amongst the country is purposeful to keep us from finding the proper solutions. But I also think that, I mean, even in places of unity, I mean, there were 12 tribes of Israel. They all sat around in their individual spots labeled out around the tabernacle. Like there's an order that needs to be in place, right? But that order can become too rigid, and usually it fails. And then and I've used this analogy talking to my son because I was at a transition point in my life. I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, a year ago, and it was a long drawn out kind of transition process. And I was asking myself the question. I could see that this was going to be bringing about a big change. And would it be appropriate to stoke the fire and allow the change to happen more quickly? And I ended up coming up with the idea that I just let it burn. I let the thing take place. Maybe I have an opportunity to learn from the slow burn that is taking place in this transition that I can see coming. And out of the carnage of the old thing, not that the old thing was bad, but just out of that thing coming and decomposing and becoming something different, that creates the fertilizer for the new thing to develop in. So you don't
Mhm.
want to stoke the fire, right? But you also, you should be attentive to it. You should be watching it, and you should be ready to pounce when it's time to pounce. I've come to
Yes.
call the term actively waiting. And I think we're in a transition period similar to that. You brought up judges going to kings. You brought up, all the different things. I believe we are in a transition period in society. And so I don't want to stoke the fire. I also do not fundamentally don't believe, while I think the law is good, unless it's written in our hearts so that we can see the upper layer, instituting a new power politically or otherwise, religious, Christian nationalism, none of it will work. It'll ultimately kind of end up in the same place. I do think that there is, and I'm totally speculating here, but I do think there's a potential for something new to develop. And like I said at the beginning of our talk here, in the seed of the new thing that develops, it's going to bring about the potential for both great good and both great horrors and suffering.
Mhm.
I think
We
Christ
want an orderly and peaceful transfer of power and change.
which is always
I think we can all agree about that. We don't want a failed state and civil war and invasions. We just want people to say what they believe to be the truth, maybe speak truth to power if we're up to that sort of thing, and have a national and international debate about what's gone wrong and what could put it right in a peaceful and civil and orderly way. Surely there's enough of Western civilization left to facilitate that.
I look, I hope you're right, because that would mitigate less suffering. But my sense is that things are so pluralistic, and the spectrum for which right and wrong is decided, it's going to force us to become much smaller before something bigger moves in. And in that time of vacuums of power, which we've seen, I mean, look, how long did we spend in Afghanistan just to have ISIS still running the place? I mean, I think my and yeah, I think things are going to get way smaller before they get bigger. Is my thought process, and that's going to change everything. While we're also going to be able to talk between England and the United States in this conversation, because I think this is going to continue to go too. But I think in many ways the IRL is going to shrink massively. It already kind of has. The generation that's coming up has made their IRL so tiny. And not everybody, but I would say the most. I mean, when you think about the majority of kids today, we make all the pejoratives, they live in mommy's basement and Cheeto dust and just playing video games. That world is tiny. So I think both things are happening at once. And, as much as I'm fearful, I'm also so much more hopeful than I was in the previous decade. Because in
Well,
these times, the right move is going to prevail when everybody else is tossing and turning and getting thrown about by the seas. Those individuals that have a steady rock to stand on, they're going to seem, you know what I mean? They're going to rise above because they're not getting tossed to and fro.
Well, they do say things have to get worse before they get better, and the meaning is that people have to suffer in order to make them seek the solution with greater urgency and be bolder in their proposals than previously.
But that breaks my heart. That breaks my heart. It also breaks my heart that it's been a long time coming, multiple generations since we've had something like a Great Depression. The GFC would have been it, but nothing stopped.
GFC?
The Great Financial Crisis. So
Oh,
that's
right, right.
2007, 2008.
Hmm.
The markets almost stopped. The ability to buy and sell almost stopped. It was pretty crazy, and nobody really knows it. They're upset because mommy and daddy lost their house, but the
Hmm.
financial world almost came to a grinding, halting stop.
Hmm.
Right? That's why they did the ultimate sin. That's why they made the banks bigger. It
But
was,
in a way, they doubled down.
but they
They
had
doubled
to. There
down
was
on their usury.
there was no other way to fix it. That was the only thing. And just imagine, like, it's not that hard to imagine. Any grocery store has no more than about 3 days worth of food for the immediate local community around that grocery store. You see this all the time in hurricanes, empty shelves, right?
Hmm.
It's only about 3 days, and it's a constant on-demand delivery system that is required, and that all requires transactions to take place. right? The driver's got to get paid. They got to be able to put gas in their truck. The people got to be paying somebody to receive the goods. It's got to go on the shelves. Like, tons and tons and, well, not tons, billions of
It's
transactions.
kind of like the human body breathing air and the blood circulating.
And the blood of this system is the financial world. The financial world is the blood that keeps the thing pumping. You have to have transactions taking place. My worry, and I think you've talked about this in usury, and I wholeheartedly agree with usury being the problem, because it makes it more often that debt will be used, right? Because you can gain a profit from using debt, and by using debt, you're using something that is an it's like the spiritual realm of the financial world, because
It's
the
a
debt.
behavioral addiction of shaking the money tree.
Yeah,
If you can
no,
create money out of nothing, why wouldn't you? And keep going back to it.
well, it's because you have to. Otherwise, the system cracks and breaks. We
Well,
use so much debt now that this is the reason why the federal budget is doubling every so often, because we're in the hockey stick of the exponential up curve.
well,
In
that's why
order,
you have to go around invading to other countries. You have no money, so you have to invade other people's countries to take their stuff. But I think
but you
it could.
still have to increase the money supply. You have to double the money supply every so often.
Well, the military spending.
Well, no, just in general, because if you have the money supply, which used to be represented in gold coins, and you're creating debt, which is I will pay you back later. It's a futures contract on the real thing.
Hmm.
So you're essentially doubling the money supply.
Hmm.
You know what the worst thing people can do in a system like this? If you really wanted to revolt, never take out debt. Debt is the creation of money.
But if
You
you
never take out debt, you end up crushing the system from the top, because there's no more debt. You are erasing money when you take out debt, or when you pay off your debt.
yeah, but I did ask AI this question, and Grok seemed to think you could do it. So if you banned usury tomorrow, for example, then it means everybody can default on their debts, including governments. They could do that, and
But
they
what
have to
does that
start
also
again
mean?
and
It
rebase
also
their
means
currency.
contracts.
Hmm?
It also means contracts. Contracts represent relationships. Everything
Yeah.
stops.
So you could say you can default on your loan if you pay back the principal. If you pay back the principal, you can default. You could do that, and most people have already, paid back the principal, so many times over. It's a compound interest that they can't keep up with, right? So that would, it's nice and easy to understand. And
Yeah,
then
but that interest that you're not paying back is someone else's asset. And
it's a
someone
bank's
else
asset.
used that asset to buy more assets.
But
It's
the
a
thing is,
domino. If the interest stops getting paid, the next domino will fall, and the whole system will fall.
well, property prices would come down.
Yeah, because nobody would have any assets.
But then you just have to let everything fall where it is, and see how it falls, and then work out how to emerge from that.
But that's bad. You stop. What's the closest farm you live to? What's the closest place you could walk to get money? Because you won't be able to pump gas. You won't be able to plug in your vehicle. You're going to have to walk to a farm to get money. How far away is that farm from you right now? And then when
I
you
think
get there, you're
interim,
going to have to give them something, because the money's worthless now.
yeah, and actually, digital currency is something that the government can manage, right?
Yeah,
It can say,
but the power companies aren't working.
well, the
Like
power companies will still
everything's
be
not,
paid.
because you can't transact. Once you make and reset all the prices for everything, you realize how many people are ownership, like the amount. Okay, do you have a 401k?
I don't know what that is.
Do you have an investment like a retirement plan?
Not much of one.
Okay. But the government, if you have any kind of, say, social network, like Social Security in our area, or the NIH for your area, they have money invested in the markets. So if you cause the value of assets to rapidly depreciate, this is what happened during the GFC. During the GFC, housing prices came down, right? And they were correct that it was a small part of the market in the subprime area, where most of the people in the subprime area defaulted on their loans, which makes that loan not valuable, for one. And for two, somebody else was already spending the interest on that loan, or at least using the interest that was due throughout the course of the loan as collateral for other stuff. And this is where leverage comes from. People were doing this 30 times over on the same loan, right? So it's just bouncing. And the problem
Well, I
during
guess
the
the government could step in and make
they did,
interim arrangements.
but that's
You
why
know,
they made the banks bigger, because they had to inject liquidity was the term they used. They had to pump actual dollar bills, real dollar bills, to make up because the debt was collapsing. And that debt is owned by people. People own that debt. If you have any open credit card, if you have a mortgage, if you have a car loan, if you have a Sears Roebucks credit card, all these things, other people own that debt. And in owning that debt, they own the asset behind that debt, which is the interest, the usury. But this is why it's supposed to not be used, because you build these structures on top of the debt. And as the debt collapses, and it doesn't take much for it to collapse, all it really takes is a lack of movement of money. Because you have so much more money in the system because of the debt, it has to keep moving. This is why the analogy of musical chairs always comes up during
the circulation of the velocity of the circulation of money.
It allows you to build on the interest that doesn't actually exist.
That's why you mustn't hoard debt. Sorry, you mustn't hoard your money, because it's no good. You know, Mr. Moneybags, just not spending any
That's why
of
they
your
want you to
money.
keep spending it. That's why they want you
But also,
that's why the next helicopter money, I think, is going to come with time frames. They're going to helicopter more money into our bank accounts like they did before, but they're going to put a time stamp on it. They're going to say you've got to spend it by X amount of dates.
but thrift is also necessary because you need to have savings, so they're not, you know, rewarding the prudent. They're saying, well, if you save money,
but what do you
it's
hide
just
your
going to
savings
be
in?
worth
Like
less.
everybody's savings nowadays, well, I shouldn't say everybody's, but where most people save their money is in their retirement accounts. And their retirement accounts are using the same system. You put your money into a 60-40 split of stocks and bonds. Bonds are nothing more than debt. It's like buying a company's currency. And that debt comes with an interest payment. That's how the money's able to grow, is because the interest is actually being paid and pumped in there, and the money system spreads out. The problem is they got to make the real thing double every so often because of where we are in that exponential curve. So in order for
They keep raising the debt ceiling,
principle,
don't they?
They have to double it to keep up with the hockey stick as it goes parabolic. This is why making as we learned in Ireland, when they were hammered with all the what was the word they used, where they had to exercise fiscal responsibility. damn, the word's escaping me. But they were forced to cut back on some of their programs, and the way the Irish government responded was they cut corporate taxes to get companies to dump money into that state.
But they're now a tax haven, aren't they?
But that's how they fixed it: austerity. So during times of financial collapse, they start talking these words. Austerity is one of them. When you start hearing the word austerity, that means that they're cutting benefits.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that you will no longer have access to free shit. Sorry for cussing, but we're taking away the free stuff, and the free stuff is crazy. I mean,
they might even have to reintroduce slavery.
Trash, water, electric.
Yeah, so you just manage the system where, the people who work in the essential services get paid.
Well, that was COVID. We saw that during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We saw what the essential services were. Fast food restaurants became essential places because they're delivering food to people. And we don't live in walking distance of farms anymore.
Well, there seems to be enough food circulating around. I mean, it's just a matter of managing, the transition between lowering property prices and, people getting paid and being able to buy their groceries. And then things will settle down and then, people will find that they can afford to buy their own homes, etc. Because, the easy money means, foreigners can just come in and buy, property in one lump sum, while the locals can't afford to do that. And obviously that causes a lot of resentment. And, income inequalities is the unintended consequence of usury, I guess. But obviously
This is why it's outlawed in the Bible. Because it's going to build a system that is ultimately... When I think about the rules in the Bible, I believe that they're God's way of expressing to us how we can best navigate this world without causing suffering.
Mm-hmm.
You may not experience pleasure, but you will mitigate the suffering if you follow these rules. There's still going to be suffering. There's still going to be snake bites, and
neither a borrower nor a lender be.
But if you
that's a biblical advice, isn't it?
But we've been ignoring those rules. I believe much to at least the tenets of what I've been able to hear you say with usury. There was a gentleman you were talking to that was pinning it all on usury. I fundamentally agree with that. What I will say though is if you think that you can pivot the system that is this large. This was always my argument against welfare reform too, is the fact that you can't just cut people off. You create
make sure they don't starve.
Yes, you create massive vacuums, and you can't do this with the financial system either. You're talking about trillions of dollars in debt that somebody owes the interest payment on.
Well, the point is these bankers don't have armies, right? It's a government that controls the police and the army. And if the government wants to ban usury, there's nothing the bankers can do about it.
Well, but that's the problem because we're all intertwined into it. And this is why I use the retirement accounts. Everybody's tied to the system. Even the people on the very bottom are tied to the system. Welfare checks come from this system. The entire idea, we don't even carry cash anymore. We have no physical manifestation of the thing that we're using to actually buy real goods.
Well, the system, the current system we have of using cards, etc., to buy stuff, that should be maintained by the government. But obviously the value of it is going to change as usury is banned. But I don't...
That requires maintenance. To maintain
Yeah.
the system, you have to have the little machines. You have to have people printing out all those horribly environmentally unconscious plastic cards with a magnetic strip in them. Somebody's got to print those things out. Somebody's got to manage the telephone lines in which that system is run on. And then you got to have massive power plants running the farm servers that are keeping track of that ledger. Like all this. So in order to do that, the people that are doing all that have to extract some value out of the act of you going like this,
Well,
which in of itself is nothing more than agreement between me, the buyer, and you, the seller. You're selling me something. I have found the thing that you have to be valuable, and I am willing to make a trade.
yeah, we don't want to be reduced to bartering.
No, but that system that's in place doesn't just come out of thin air. So you have to have a means
Well, I mean, we can.
people that are doing all the work to make this possible, to extract some value out of that exchange. This is what I think makes usury fundamentally evil, because it puts somebody else on a decision between me and you to make a trade, whether it be for money, whether it be for credits on my credit cards, or whether it be for a jar of mayonnaise for a jar of honey. We are making a decision. We are entering into a contract, a decision that we think this is a fair trade. Now, somebody is coming up on top of that and harvesting value, because it's not free to swipe the card.
Yeah, it's a transaction charge,
Correct.
right? But it can still be managed.
Not without interest.
Are you a trained
Not
economist?
without interest. It can't be managed without interest.
I don't think people make the distinction between simple and compound interest. They think it's all the same thing. Of course, people will have to pay a transaction fee, but it's not necessarily compound interest, is it?
But somebody's got to pay for that fee. So who
Yeah,
pays?
sure.
The
So
buyer or the seller?
yeah. So let's say we have a loan agreement, and for I lend you $100, and then we agree that for every year you fail to return to me my $100, you pay me $10. But it doesn't compound, you
That's
see.
usury.
No, it's not. It's simple interest. Compound interest and simple interest are two different things. And you can pay back because, obviously the fee. I mean, I'm not going to lend you money for free. I will charge you something, and this is kind of, you might think it's, maybe it's $5 or $1, depending on the rate of inflation or whatever. But we can come to an agreement, and I think what people fail to distinguish is the difference between compound and simple interest. And
Okay,
obviously, we're not expecting anybody to do anything for free.
Mm-hmm.
But
I see where you're getting at, and I haven't delved into the difference between the two, and maybe there's a distinction there. Is that distinction identified in the understanding of the use of usury in the Bible? Does the Bible make the distinction between simple and compound interest?
I don't know about that, to be honest. But the thing is, Jews were forbidden to practice usury on each other, which suggests that God thought usury was bad, and they should know that usury is a bad thing, but they can practice on us, and the Quran forbids it for everybody, which is kind of fair.
Does the Quran make a distinction between compound and simple interest?
It doesn't mention that, but it says the Quran encourages commerce, but forbids usury. And of course, this is another word, like, people, say it means simple. It includes simple interest, but of course, nobody's going to, lend you money for free. So you have to pay them something, or they won't lend it to you. But there is a verse.
Free all the time.
Yes, yes. But the point is,
and if we're brothers and sisters in Christ, shouldn't I give my brother and sister a free loan?
Yeah. I mean, you can call it charity. I give it to you freely. I don't expect it back. But feel free if you want to return my favor in some way. So I really think it can be done. But I think, okay, what I've been doing is ask economists, like, can you envisage such a situation? How would it be done? And they all run out of the room and they refuse to answer. And more recently, I identified somebody who's supposed to know all about Islamic finance, and he won't answer my question either. So I guess they're all scared because, of course, usury and banking is a sacred cow of the West, and if you say anything like that, you'd probably be identified as some,
or maybe they also
radical or
know what
something.
I fear. Maybe they know even better what I'm talking about, is because the entire system is built on that now. By getting rid of it would essentially mean doom.
But the thing about the Quran, and this I think is important, is that there is a verse about loan agreements. So it acknowledges the existence of these things and how it is, it facilitates commerce. And one of the more interesting thing about this verse is that you need somebody to witness this loan agreement, and it can be a man, but if you can't find a man, 2 women will do. And that's the supposed sexism of this, but there it is. The Quran envisages loan agreements,
but forbids
so,
usury.
Yeah, it forbids usury. So the problem with compound interest is that sooner or later the debtor realizes they cannot repay the creditor. And I guess the problem with Jews is that they're actually supposed to declare a jubilee every, 7 years, 11 years. They free their slaves, they forgive all debt. And I guess they haven't done that. And because they haven't done that, because Christian kings would invite them in.
So what calendar to use.
But I think in the case of Oliver Cromwell, there was an edict of expulsion of the Jews in 1290, when I guess Edward I said, well, I'm never going to pay back these Jews, so I'm going to kick them out, and destroy the records of loan agreement, so they can't be expecting me to repay their interest. And then Oliver Cromwell thought, well, now that I am Lord Protector of the English Republic, my legacy will be to fight an imperial war in Ireland and take it over. Oh, I'll need money to finance my imperial war. And that's why I invited the Jews back in, to borrow money from them. But I guess, the whole idea is that once the debtor realizes he'll never be able to pay it back, they kick out the Jews, and that, I think, neatly explains why they have been expelled. And also that they broke their own rules, because they're supposed to declare a jubilee every, maybe they're a bit vague about exactly how many years they should do it in. But that's it. Sometimes we have to forgive debt, or our debtor will want to kick us out and not ever have to pay us any more interest. But yes, it will mean a clean slate, and it will, I think, change the mood. It will mean people will think, oh, well, I can do stuff again. But because one of the terrible things about debt is that okay, you lose your job, but at least you can borrow because you're still credit worthy, and you still have a house, and you can mortgage it, and you can have a second mortgage or a third mortgage, and this is a bubble thing you were talking about. But eventually your creditors might think, this guy is never going to pay me back. I might as well cut my losses and stop lending to him, and crystallize my losses and say, right, I'm not going to lend him anymore. It means he'll default, but at least I'm not lending him any more money and being crazy and losing even more money, because I don't want to, face the fact that this guy is never going to pay me back. And this is, I guess, this is all really all about psychology.
You know what used to happen to you when that happened?
Debtor's prison? Slavery?
You became a slave.
Yeah.
You became a slave to pay off your debts.
Yes. And,
Yes.
and and that I think is fair enough. That would make people stop lending and borrowing irresponsibly.
But then doesn't that make you an advocate for the greatest sin that America has ever committed?
Well, no, I don't think it's a greater sin because it's like God forbade a lot of things. he forbade a whole bunch of things, but he never forbade slavery in either the Bible or the Quran. So I guess it's necessary. And wasn't it slavery that made America great? Because all those Europeans, they couldn't afford the Atlantic crossing. Could they afford the fare? I don't think so. They had to
No,
sell
very,
themselves
very
into
many
indentured
of them
servitude.
became indentured servants just for the
Yeah,
fare. Yeah.
yeah. But and therefore, but that was what enabled all those Europeans to get across the Atlantic anyway. So I guess it's a mixed bag. And
But then we
people
get,
call
so now we're slammed right back into the moral question. We've rationally brought ourselves full circle to now call what many people would call America's greatest sin in slavery. I mean, you can't deny that that's in the culture, right? So
but
now it
maybe
rests back on the morals and to what do you think is the greater of the evils, right? Do you
well,
think that debt is the greater evil over slavery?
well
This is
it's
where
linked.
rationality doesn't work, right? Because
Well,
eventually you'll end up in these kinds of situations all the time.
the thing is, slavery isn't completely banned because prison slavery
No,
is
I know,
allowed.
but I would say the temperature of the culture at large is the fact that slavery is without question the greatest evil ever committed by the human species. That's at
But
least
it's
the
an
tenant.
institution.
I'm sorry.
It, it's an institution. It's a bargain.
Yeah,
It's a bargain, like
a
marriage, like
relationship.
prostitution.
It's a relationship.
Uh, uh, yes, yes, because there are people who would willingly sell themselves into slavery if the thing they want to is enough. If they want the thing enough, and it- you know,
So so
and,
so
and the point.
should that great evil be an option for people to choose?
Well, who are we to say what is good and what is evil? If God
The
did not
law,
forbid
the
it,
law tells us what's good and evil.
but
So,
shouldn't the
so
law
then
be based
should
on
that
some
great
kind of
evil,
system?
I mean, see how we're spinning? I mean, this is fun, Claire. I mean, I'm not trying to like do a bunch of gotchas or anything. I'm just noticing how the thing quickly, we just simply introduced a new topic that is typically siloed, right? Financials are siloed away from morality and questions like religion, which is normally what we talk about over here. We interject one new siloed topic, which is one reason why I think there is some intentionality of sayings like stay in your lane and only let the expert talk about the different thing, right? Because they know the best. But the second we've taken our very rationalist kind of logical moral framework over here and we imported the new thing, we've all of a sudden spun ourselves around to, of all things, slavery and
Which
whether
is
or
not
not it's
forbidden by
moral good
God.
or evil.
It's not forbidden by God.
Well,
Is
that
America
is
one nation under God, trusting in God?
that is an extraordinarily uh, minority type of viewpoint, I would say, here in the States. I would say
But
most
who
people
are
would
we to
chant
decide?
the slogan that no slavery under any circumstances should be allowed.
But who said that?
That's the tenets of the culture here. Because we
But the
carry the great
culture.
sin, it's kind of like I don't know, you hear about Germans and how they carry the guilt of what happened after World War II, that they self-censor themselves. Right? It's similar to that in the United States when it comes to slavery. The
Well,
topic
yes.
is not allowed to be spoken like this, right?
Well, I think white people can say, well, we were enslaved too, right? It's not just black
You
people who
can
were
say
enslaved.
that and be factually correct, but it will not, to your earlier point, win your argument.
Well, because
As a matter of
people
fact,
don't.
it will condemn your argument if you were to make a statement like that.
Well, I will continue to make it because I think it's truth and logic are survival
The little I
strategies.
know you, I am not surprised whatsoever.
Because they can't find any, better argument. It's like, we don't like it. It's like, yeah, but it's just your opinion. Who are you to forbid it? It's caused a lot of problems, really, because if you don't, not having slavery means you don't have this okay, workfare is basically the idea that people should work for the welfare benefits that they receive, right? And the problem with workfare is that you create an even greater cost for the state by hiring somebody to make sure people come in on time and do their work properly, and they say, oh, it's just easier just to give it to them, no questions asked. And not even have a means test or whatever. But that means, the problem will be, a welfare state that keeps growing and growing and growing, and people thinking, oh, well, maybe I would enjoy my life better if I just stayed at home and played video games all day, because I'm entitled to UBI, aren't I? So anyway, you're harming the future of your country. But while if it was slavery, it's like, well, nobody starves on the streets. Well, the state will make sure that you do something useful, and you will have the right to manumission, which is a Roman and Islamic right. The ancient Greeks, slaves had no right to manumission, but then they discovered that the slaves just, did the least they could do. But if you say you will get manumission if you work, over a certain years, and then you can, maybe even save a nest egg for you to start your life as a freeman, but you have to work and, or whatever. So that was a kind of, incentive system for people who are already slaves. I just, it can be done in a humane way.
Also the potential, because we got to look at both the good and evil of the new thing that's emerging here. So with the potential that somebody, and many people will, use that structure of power and system of power to abuse it, and to get every last red cent out of every single bought and paid for slave.
I have a slave protection scheme.
Well, so right, but you ultimately you're always opening up a new evil to the solution when you bring about the new solution.
Indeed, but because you have to anticipate how people might abuse it.
Right.
And my proposal is to have
and fourth order effects, right? And
yeah,
we are not good at understanding that at all.
Because
the variables are too vast. You get exponential variables as you move through the steps. And we're not good. Only geniuses can do it, like your Magnus Carlsens that can think multiple moves ahead on a very finite chessboard. It's a very finite number of pieces and a number of spaces. So it limits the amount of possibility. When you're talking about real world societal type changes, the exponentials on just two moves, you can't do it. This is where I think AI will.
Oh no!
I don't know what happened. It just kicked me off.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I dropped my pen on the space bar and that removed you for some reason.
We should probably wrap this up. I gotta cook breakfast. So
okay,
late.
Well,
It's 10:00. My wife's already been up for an hour. So I think that's the possibility. Just to throw in one.
Right. Well, we've covered several that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, let me tell you my slave protection scheme. So
Okay.
I am proposing to have slave visitors to ensure that the slave is working properly and government property is not being damaged, because we are really, at the end of the day, the slaves of our government. Because, they're being polite at the moment and saying we have these rights and those rights, but of course they could take it away, very easily if they control the police, the army, the telecommunications, the media. So really, obviously, the property of the slave would reside in the government, and the government would have to, make sure that government property is not being damaged, and they could create a career structure, even because under the Roman system, a lot of slaves were scribes, they were tutors, they were nannies. If you read the the Trojan Women by Euripides, because there was King Priam's wife complaining after the Greeks stormed Troy that she would be taken away as a slave, probably to be a nanny. So it's not all picking cotton and being worked to death in the mines. Is
Right.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah,
and
and I would even build on your case that there is the potential for good to come out of that through a proper relational understanding of the roles between master and slave. Right. I think some good could come out of that. I can envision very easily a proper master and a proper slave toiling together in the greenhouses of their estate and being
yes,
able to find the formula for name your something good, whether it be a hybrid version of a plant that increases yield for the whole society, right? Because then they just propagate this thing out, sell the seeds, make a profit selling the seeds, right? All within that proper relation between master that I could see building on that. But I
yes,
can
we need to
also
know who
see
we
like
are
a
and where
whole
we are in the pecking order of society in this hierarchy. And once we know that, um, everything will come right again. It's because so many of us have identity issues. Men don't know they're supposed to be men. They don't know how to behave, and neither do women. And I think just one sex needs to know how to behave, and the other sex will just take, what remains for them to do. I really think it
No,
is
I,
as
d- I
simple as
would
that.
disagree with that. I mean, there's behaviors in every relationship. I think the behaviors are based around the ultimate goal of the individuals in the relationship of how you should behave. I mean, I think fundamentally men and women are structured different. I think that
Well,
bears
well,
out
yes,
in
exactly. So,
right.
so men are very clear about the kind of woman they want. It's the women who are not clear. Do they want, some simp,
Again,
or do they want a
not a
bad
new
boy?
story.
Yeah, yeah, and
Science
we'll talk for
piece.
another 3 hours
Science
about that.
piece.
But at least with you men, you know what you want. You know what you want in a woman. Women don't know what they want in a
I
man.
think I know what I want in this moment, but I will fully, and this is going to have to be my final deal before we go. I will also concede the fact that my wants change throughout time
Mhm.
and throughout experience. So I changed my mind. What I thought was important and great and good in my 20s is not the same thing it is as I approach 50. And
Yeah,
that
and that's why
fundamentally
we should
changes how
respect
I
our
act.
elders.
I'm sorry.
That's why we should respect our elders, because once upon a time we were children, like,
Are
wanting
you
to climb
calling me old?
trees and wanting toys and sweets, and then we
It's
grew
on
up a
my hair
little
back.
and, liked music and clothes and, you know, and then holidays and, whatnot. So yes, we as we grow old, we have different interests and priorities. And
But
yeah.
I do not believe in the same right and wrong as what I believed in my 20s. I do
Well,
not.
thank goodness that we are capable of changing our minds, and yes, and recognizing the foolishness of youth when we thought we knew everything. Right. I thought I knew
No,
everything.
we knew everything. That's the problem.
Yes.
Okay, Claire. Look, I gotta go cook breakfast. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Again, another very enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, Scott.
All right.
Have a
Bye
good
now.
day.
You
Bye.
too.